In a field it is a cow, on a plate it is beef. In a pen it is a pig, on a plate it is pork. On a hill it is a sheep, on a plate it is mutton. A young cow is a calf, and on a plate it is veal. A deer is venison. English does this so consistently that native speakers never notice it is strange. It is strange, no other Germanic language does it. Look at what everyone else is doing. Every one of these is a compound. A word for cattle plus a word for meat, cattle flesh, that is all any of them is doing. English is the only one of the group that reached for a completely different word. And the reason for that is a date everybody already knows. On the 14th of October 1066, William of Normandy beat the English army near Hastings. For the next 300 years, the people running the country did not speak English. They spoke a variety of French. The court spoke it, the law spoke it, and the accounts were kept in it. 20 years after the battle, the new administration counted the entire country. The Great Survey of 1086 recorded around 13,000 places, and it was written in Latin, by clerks working for a French-speaking king. English carried on underneath all of that, because most people in England still spoke nothing else, but it lost every job that came with status. It took until 1362 for Parliament to order that court cases be heard in English again, nearly 3 centuries. And when English came back up into official life, it came back carrying an enormous amount of French. The usual count is around 10,000 French words borrowed in that period, and roughly 3/4 of them are still in use. The animal words are the cleanest single example, because they come in pairs you can lay side by side. Cow, swine, sheep, those are the old words, and they were in England before the Normans arrived. Beef, pork, mutton, those came in from French. So the standard version of this story is that the Anglo-Saxon peasant looked after the animal and the Norman lord ate it. 2 vocabularies for one creature split by class. That version has been in circulation for 200 years, and it comes from a novel. Walter Scott put it into Ivanhoe in 1819. 2 characters, a swineherd and a jester, are walking through a forest, and the jester points out that the animal is Saxon while it is alive in Norman once it becomes something to eat. It is a very good line. It is also a 19th century novelist's observation rather than a piece of research, and it has been repeated ever since as though it were both. Walter Scott put it into Ivanhoe in 1819. Most of these food words do not turn up in English right after 1066. The dictionary's earliest citations for beef, pork, mutton, and venison all cluster around 1300. That is more than 2 centuries after the battle, so they are not the invading nobility's dinner table vocabulary landing overnight. They are the vocabulary of a fashionable French-speaking food culture that the English gradually adopted. And some of them did not start out meaning meat at all. In early use, the borrowed word could refer to the living animal too, and the neat split hardened later. Which is more interesting than the tidy version, not less. It means English did not simply get robbed of half its words in a single generation. It absorbed a second vocabulary over centuries and then found jobs for both sets. Because once you see the pattern, it is everywhere in English, and it is doing real work. Ask and inquire both mean the same thing. One is a question, the other is a procedure. Which is more interesting than the tidy version, not less. It means English did not simply get robbed of half its words in a single generation. It absorbed a second vocabulary over centuries and then found jobs for both sets. Because once you see the pattern, it is everywhere in English, and it is doing real work. Ask and inquire both mean the same thing. One is a question, the other is a procedure. Help and assist, buy and purchase, end and conclude, freedom and liberty. Kingly, royal, regal, the same idea, 3 different arrival dates, and English kept all 3 because it found a shade of meaning for each. And in every pair, the second one sounds more formal. That is not a coincidence, and it is not an accident of taste. It is 3 centuries of the borrowed vocabulary being the one used by people in charge. Sometimes English kept 3 layers. Chicken is chicken. There is no separate posh word for it on the plate. This is the thing English is actually unusual for, not the size of its vocabulary, the fact that it has 2 or 3 complete sets of it, stacked by formality. German can build any word it needs out of parts it already owns. English reaches for a different language depending on how serious it wants to sound. Now, if the class story were the whole story, every farm animal would have split. They did not. Chicken is chicken. There is no separate posh word for it on the plate. Beef, pork, mutton, and venison were the meats of a household with a kitchen staff and a French-speaking employer. A chicken was something anybody might keep in a yard. There is a word poultry from French, but it is the trade in the category, not the thing on the plate. Nobody orders a plate of poultry. At its height, that royal forest covered something close to a quarter of England, and it was not forest in the modern sense. It was land under a separate legal code, with its own courts and its own punishments. The word for the animal is native. In Old English it simply meant animal before it narrowed to one species. The word for eating it is French, because eating it was a privilege the French speakers controlled. The likeliest answer is the least romantic one. The split follows what was worth serving at a feast. 3 centuries of French running the courts, the law, and the crown. 10,000 words in, and the center of the language did not move at all. Venison is the giveaway. Deer were hunted under forest law, which was Norman law. In forests the crown had taken over for the purpose. Head, hand, foot, eye, ear, mouth. Eat, drink, sleep, walk, live, sun, moon, day, night, rain, snow, house, home, land, water, fire. Every one of those came down from Old English. 300 years of French at the top of the country, and the words you used before breakfast never moved. One language did get in deeper. Round 2,000 words came in from Norse, and some of them were right in the middle where French could not reach. But that was a different kind of contact. Norse speakers settled next to English speakers and farmed the same fields. The French sat above them in a courtroom. You borrow different words from a neighbour than from a landlord. Count from 1 to 10. All 10 are native words, inherited, not borrowed. I, you, he, she, we, man, woman, child, father, mother, son, daughter. Head, hand, foot, eye, ear, mouth. Eat, drink, sleep, walk, live, sun, moon, day, night, rain, snow, house, home, land, water, fire. Every one of those came down from Old English. 300 years of French at the top of the country, and the words you used before breakfast never moved. So a French speaker learning English still has to learn a new word for hand and foot and eye and bread and house. What they get to keep is the top half. Prosecute, adjacent, consider, receive, contract, evidence. The formal register is very nearly a second French vocabulary sitting on top of an English one. Which means the class split you can hear in cow and beef is not a curiosity in the meat aisle. It runs through the entire language, and once you can hear it you cannot switch it off. Count from 1 to 10. All 10 are native words, inherited, not borrowed. Pig, across the family. Every one of them builds the meat word out of the animal word. Swedish is the one that breaks the pattern, and even that word is a cousin of the English word flesh rather than a borrowing from anywhere. Sheep, same story. The animal and then the animal plus meat. German does have a separate word for mutton specifically, built from an old word for a castrated ram, but that is still German building from German. Meanwhile, the other Germanic languages had no invasion of this kind, so you can see what English would have looked like without one. And one of them refuses to go shopping for anything. Icelandic is the control group for this entire question. It has spent centuries deliberately not borrowing. When a new thing arrives, Icelandic builds a word for it out of Icelandic. A computer is a number prophetess, from the words for number and sirsa. A telephone is named after an old word for a thread. A helicopter is a whirler. And one of them refuses to go shopping for anything. Icelandic is the control group for this entire question. It has spent centuries deliberately not borrowing. When a new thing arrives, Icelandic builds a word for it out of Icelandic. So back to the field. The reason English has 2 words for a cow is not that Normans were greedy, it is that English spent 3 centuries as the lower of 2 languages in its own country, and came out the other side with both vocabularies still in its mouth. It is the road English did not take, and the result is a language where an ordinary speaker can often see straight through a technical word to what it is made of. English lost that almost entirely. Most English speakers cannot see inside the word telephone because the parts are Greek. You gain something and you lose something. English gained a vocabulary with 3 registers and a word for every shade. It lost the ability to look at a word and know what it says. So back to the field. There is a whole channel of these, and the next one is already being written.